Hey guys, I am here with another ARC review a little bit later than I planned, like in the day, but right on time for a potential Pride Month rec if you are interested, because I am talking about another poly romance novel. You may remember a little while ago when Michaela and I both read and reviewed a book called Really Cute People, and we talked about how we wanted to see more polyamorous romances represented, not in like fantasy romance or like these dark romances, but just like regular normal people doing their thing. And so when I saw Triple Sec by TJ Alexander, I knew that I had to read it to kind of see, compare, and just kind of support these different types of romance novels and from these different authors. TJ Alexander is an author that has been recommended to me before, so their books not necessarily new to me, but I've actually never read one. So for anyone who is a fan of TJ Alexander's previous books, I don't know anything about them. This is the first time for me. So this is an ARC review, so this book is not quite out yet, but thanks to the publisher and Edelweiss for giving me a free advance copy for my fair and honest review. So Triple Sec is a polyamorous romance, but it is a single POV novel, and POV that you get is from Mel. So when the novel begins, Mel is working at her job at Terror and Virtue, which is a high-end cocktail bar in New York City, and she's kind of talking a little bit about her life and her job, and you kind of get the sense immediately that Mel is not a romantic. She doesn't believe in romance or love, and it's kind of related to the fact that she got divorced from her wife a few years ago, and it kind of just decided that love was not going to be for her. Cut to a beautiful woman comes into her bar and sits down, and Mel is immediately taken by this woman, and just they begin to talk and the sparks are flying, and Mel is just like, I think this woman is flirting with me, but I'm not sure. Her name is Bibi, and she is a lawyer, an entertainment lawyer, and Mel is just like feeling that instant connection, and it seems that Bibi is too. Mel makes her one of her signature cocktails, and they start talking about it, and Mel's dreams to someday potentially run her own bar and mix her own unique cocktails. And then Mel gets pulled away to do some more work at the bar she is working, and all of a sudden someone else enters the bar. This person is genderqueer. They use they, them pronouns. They pop right up next to Bibi and give her a swift kiss. And when Mel goes back over, very confused that she has misread this entire situation, Bibi introduces Mel to her wife, Cade. Mel at this point is just kind of like, oh my God, so embarrassed. I totally misread this moment. So she kind of backs away and off the whole thing. But unfortunately for her, she has already accepted Bibi's invitation to brunch at her and Cade's apartment. And Mel is just like, what do I do? She goes back to her apartment and talks to her best friend, Daniel. And Daniel says, you know what, just go. Even if they are married, maybe you make some friends. Girl, just go. Some more awkwardness definitely does ensue, but basically what it all comes down to is that Bibi and Cade, yes, they are married, but they are in an open marriage, and Bibi really wants to go on a date with Mel. Cade is totally fine with it, and it's just up to Mel to decide if she wants to be in this open, like kind of poly relationship. And Mel has never done that before. She married her high school girlfriend, and they were married for, I can't remember, it's like 7 to 9 years before they got divorced. So Mel has really only ever been with this one person. She doesn't really do casual dating, but she just senses there is such a connection with Bibi, and she says yes. And it also opens her up to learning more about polyamorous relationships and the lifestyle, communication. Bibi, as a lawyer, when Mel says that she wants to drop some guidelines, is totally about it. And throughout the story, one of the cute things that you see on the page a lot is that those agreements are like shown on the page with some strike throughs or amendments made as they continue to negotiate and communicate about the guidelines and boundaries for their relationship. Things get slightly more complicated when Mel and Cade also begin to catch feelings for each other, and that is a whole new realm of a poly relationship that Mel is also just feeling very out of her depth in. And so again, it is a lot of Mel learning to be in a poly relationship with two people who are already comfortable in an established one, which is the trope that Michaela and I discussed also in our review of Really Cute People, which we will talk about some more. And then there is also a subplot slash major plot of Mel entering a cocktail competition in the hopes of winning some serious cash because she does want to open her own bar. This story, more than anything else, is about Mel learning to be in a poly relationship. There is certainly a lot of teaching that comes from mostly BB and some from Cade. Cade is a person of very few words. They are an artist, and they're not going to be holding a lot of very long conversations. So a lot of that teaching comes from BB and Mel trying to figure it out and talking to Daniel, who is also in a open slash poly relationship with his boyfriend and a few other people. And so it's kind of like everyone around Mel is kind of up on what's happening, and Mel herself is just trying to navigate it as best she can. So it really does feel in a way like a teaching book, and not that that's a bad thing, but if you were looking for something that is like a romance novel where people happen to be poly, this is not that book, because this is a book entirely about the act of being poly with some other stuff thrown in. Like the cocktail competition seems to be kind of like broached throughout the book as like one of the big events in it, and it is where it ends, but it is so underlying this whole like relationship negotiation that even in my description I was just giving, I almost forgot to mention it. One of the things that I was talking to Michaela about with this book is some of the parallels of some of the things that we were also not a huge fan of in Really Cute People, which is that the main character, who is also the one we only get their POV of, which is Mel, is the person who has never been in a poly relationship before and is entering into that kind of relationship with an established pair, which was also kind of the case in Really Cute People. It's a little bit different, but the general setup is the same. And so it's a lot of one person kind of entering into the realm of an established couple. And while there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, again, it kind of just seems like that couple is waiting for Mel to catch up with how they've already established their poly relationship working, and the addition of Mel doesn't change anything for them. It just kind of like they're just still cooking along as they have been, and they have the addition of Mel in their lives. And with no discussion between the two of them or anything like that, it kind of leaves that part of the relationship feeling very underdeveloped and really wanting to know, like, how can a person that one of you is dating just kind of enter into this life? How do you discuss it? What kind of conversations do you have? At one point, Cade does talk about that tension between really wanting to spend time with BB, but also really wanting BB to be able to be her whole self, like out in the world, and also finding Mel like a good person to be around. So there's like a little bit of that conversation, but because it happens between Mel and Cade, it's just not very developed, and it only happens like the one time in like this much room, because again, Cade, just not a verbose person. Another thing that is absolutely the same between this book and also Really Cute People is that the established pair in the relationship has quite a bit of money. Again, Cade is a fairly well-known artist, and BB is an entertainment lawyer, and they have like a cabin, you know, in ski country and all that kind of stuff. And Mel is someone who did not grow up with a lot and still does not have a lot, especially after basically her divorce, and that whole situation basically wiped out all of her savings. And so there is also that kind of feeling of this couple having a different financial situation. And then again, with Mel entering that situation, there are some conversations which are really uncomfortable about class. And This book seemed a little bit more interested in engaging with that a little bit, but mostly it's Mel being really shocked about the ways that either BB or Kate talk about money, and or like I said, they own this cabin that makes an appearance at one point in the plot, and just being like, this is not a cabin, this is a mansion. And Kate just kind of being like really annoyed, like, why are you being so weird about money? And again, it's not really talked about, but especially with, you know, Mel's dream to be owning her own bar and having the freedom to leave her job, and this couple potentially offering that along with a romantic relationship. I'm not saying that's how it happens, but it just starts to feel a little bit weird, and I'm not really a fan that it has happened now in both of these books. I don't want anyone to think that this is a bad book. I don't think it's a bad book. I think it's a fine book. I just do think that it is a rather surface level book, more focused on potentially teaching people about a very specific type of a polyamorous relationship who are not super familiar with it. I say a super specific type because it continues to follow certain tropes, some of which I've talked about already that match really cute people, and then some other ones that I've seen in other poly books, not just in like contemporary romance, but also in fantasy romance, that I think if I go into those, I will start spoiling things that happen later on in the book. And I just think that when we are having something like this new kind of queer relationships coming out of like fantasy or like dark romance, which is where a lot of some of these things start, and then they like migrate their way into contemporary romance. They absolutely should be in contemporary romance, but we need to be mindful of the tropes and the ways that those relationships are portrayed in the books that are published by more mainstream publishers. And so when I'm reading a book like this, I'm always like super attentive to that, because it happens in, you know, MM romances, it happens in like FF romances, like there is a whole like kind of chain of tropes on what is acceptable in like just any romance that's not hetero. And we just need to work on disrupting that, I think. I just also really just want us to be able to get to a point where books about poly romances are romances where the people involved happen to be poly, and not these very explanatory like teaching guidebooks like this one is, and to another certain extent really cute people, where it feels like the entire personality of the characters is their poly relationship, and the rest of the things going on in the book and their personalities feels kind of surface level. And to be clear, like as someone who has studied predominantly children's literature, but like just as someone who has studied literature in general, like this is kind of the track record, right, of like anytime any type of minority group or representation has entered mainstream literature, like there's a growing process, right? And I just really want that for poly romances. I think they have the opportunity, as this book really tried to show, to really add especially that element of communication, which for whatever reason like pair romances love to take away, to like make really, really silly communication issues and blow them up into massive problems, whereas this one is like, you know, if we just talk about it, like we can figure it out. I did love that about this book, like I said, with the contract or like guidelines that is constantly being amended, all the way to the last version, which again, I can't like quote for you without spoiling the book, but just like the final line is just, oh, it was just really cute. And watching them, you know, grow in confidence with themselves. But again, I just felt like it was a very like surface level book that really didn't dig in deep on the personalities of the characters, which left me only surface level invested in the book. So I think for me, it's about a 3.5 star book, but I do recommend that people read it or support it in whatever way you feel comfortable with, you know, getting it from your local library, whatever it is, so that we can only continue to get more of these books and get that true diversity of relationships that deserves to be out there in the romance world. Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy almost Pride Month, and hopefully I will see you a little bit more on time next week. Thanks guys. Bye.